Good afternoon. I'm just waiting for some friends to join here. Hi guys. So I'm just going to get started here in a second. Welcome, good afternoon. Welcome to Be Well Live, or what we used to call Be Well Live, now is our afternoon programming, daily theme. Welcome to, I guess, our second Ask a Trainer Tuesdays. I think last week it was Chris and Kim who discussed getting started with fitness and some common questions to get motivated and kind of where to start with general health and fitness. So this week we're going to be discussing very popular, I guess, questions regarding building muscle mass or hypertrophy or gains or whatever you want to call them. So maybe we'll debunk some popular myths that are out there, as well as discussing the diversity and that, everyone's different and it's just not one clear answer. So anyway, so my name is Mike. I am a sport coordinator in the athletics and recreation department at Seneca, and also a certified personal trainer and high performance specialist with the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology. So that's kind of my background. So we're going to be joined in a moment here by Chris Sousa, who is another CPT in the athletic department, and you'll recognize him as well. And he was here last week for our first session with Kim. So he should be requesting, so I'm going to welcome him in here. I think this is it. My first time hosting, forgive me. He should be jumping on here any second.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Yeah, there it is. It worked. How's it going, Chris?
I'm just going to turn it up a little bit. All right.
All good?
All good. All good.
All right. Thanks for joining us. I think you just tuned in. So, I didn't get the memo. I don't think. No.
Yeah, backwards hat day today.
Yeah, sorry. So basically I just gave an introduction that we're here for our second Ask a Trainer Tuesdays, where we'll discuss various topics, where we'll try to stay with muscle building and hypertrophy and some of the myths and some of the the routines you can do to incorporate and to reach that goal. So I haven't really started with any facts or any kind of opinions of my own, but I thought we could have an open dialogue, because obviously this is one of the most asked questions, and probably even opinions that you hear in a gym, right? Oh, do it my way. Hey man, this is what I do. Or and obviously with your experience, I'm sure you've heard everything on the gym floor. Right? So, so you definitely obviously will have a certain perspective, and I'll have a different one. And any gym you go to, you'll see people doing different training methods and different workouts, and someone might go up to that person, whether or not they're maybe a qualified fitness professional, but they'll ask them because what it looks like they're doing is really cool looking, or maybe that person that's performing that exercise seems to appear like they have the physique that is resulting from doing that training. So that's kind of what I have experienced. So do you have any kind of popular questions people would ask you, or where you would kind of begin with such a broad range of questions that you could answer for that?
Yeah, I guess it really depends. Usually what I do is kind of get a background feel for how long that person's been training for, what kind of training they're used to. If they're a complete beginner, the good thing about being a complete beginner is that almost anything you do will work for a short amount of time, right? Just coming into the gym and doing a couple exercises, even if they're not the most efficient, if you've never come to the gym before, and you're eating correctly and sleeping correctly, you'll see a difference in muscle mass. So if you're a beginner, you don't have to throw all these crazy kinds of exercises out. You don't have to train for hours and hours. You could be training for 45 minutes in the gym and doing 3 to 4 different exercises, and you'll get pretty far if you're eating correctly and you're resting correctly. Like you said, a lot of people will go in the gym for 2 hours, do tons of different isolation exercises. They'll wreck themselves. They'll go home. They're not eating complete meal. They're eating a lot of fast food. They're not getting enough protein, enough carbs, enough healthy fats. So the efforts that they're doing in the gym aren't really paying off because they're not recovering enough. So usually I kind of, even before I talk about training, I ask them like how they're sleeping, what they're eating, and you can get a lot of information just from those questions, right? So before you kind of start like racking your brain around what kind of training template you're going to use, really try to figure out if you're actually eating enough to grow, because muscles need that those raw resources. They don't just grow on their own, right?
Yeah, and then I think what you'll then, as a result of that, is obviously you'll have the open discussion regarding supplements, and that's a whole other discussion, right? Because those
Absolutely.
two are often associated with building muscle and lean body weight, and supplements. And well, obviously I must consume so much protein or different supplements, which obviously isn't completely necessary, right? Unless there's a diagnosed deficiency or something. Obviously there are simple supplements like protein, things like that, but nutrition, like you had said, is obviously number one. Hydration. But it's funny you had mentioned, because it's absolutely true, is if they're a beginner and they're really ambitious and they want to go in and they want to start lifting heavy weights because they think everyone thinks that perhaps that is the exact cure for gaining muscle mass, is just automatically going for the heaviest weight, and perhaps even a more traditional kind of powerlifting or very heavy load with minimal repetitions, which I guess could be geared towards more pure strength training. So I think obviously you need a combination of everything. From what I've experienced with both not just myself but with clients in the past, and everyone's different based on their experience, their maybe physiology, their genetics, their range of motion, certain things that maybe aren't necessary. So you had mentioned, don't just go in and bust out the bicep curls, right? Or the isolating exercises. What we would usually recommend is having a variety of movements or some compound exercises, or what we call multi-joint exercises, where you're involving bigger muscle groups and your whole body is working to move that weight or to do that, perform that exercise. So
that's a way more efficient use of your time. When you're doing instead of doing a bicep curl, you can do pull-ups, which you're also going to be working your back, but also your biceps, your shoulders. You're not just doing one single movement. You can get through a decent amount of stress between 3 or 4 different muscle groups by working on those compound movements.
yeah,
For sure.
absolutely.
And like you said, there's no, in my experience, for people that I've worked with, or even myself, is if you're just looking to gain muscle mass, volume is usually volume and frequency are the key players there. The powerlifting style, it's going to get you strong. You're going to be able to move efficiently, move fast. But if you're just I think a lot of people get confused, especially when they're starting out, the difference between strength training and training for hypertrophy, right?
Yeah.
Which is muscle gain. They're two different beasts. So just because someone's really strong doesn't mean their muscles are as big, right? There's two different styles of training. Physiologically, it's totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm glad you brought that up, and I think that's probably one of the biggest maybe misconceptions that you'll see in a fitness center or a gym is, well, I got to lift really heavy and minimal repetitions, and you had mentioned it as the volume and or maybe what we'd call time under tension, is the muscle needs to be that demand has to be met as far as the muscle growing and developing under tension. And it's not only that, but it's the, progressively, you can increase the intensity or the weight with as you get stronger, and then as you transition to a different phase in your training, you can maybe lower the repetitions a little bit. But if you want to stay within that muscle building phase, it's usually recommended at maybe a certain rep range. I mean, there's obviously a million different things out there, but typically it used to be kind of 8 to 12 or 6 to 10, that kind of thing. But again, two people could be on the exact same program at the exact same time and doing the same workout, and they could have different results. So again, it's everyone's different, but there are at least some common ground regarding the guidelines for this type of training. So
absolutely, I would say load is probably one of them. Usually, 50 to 60% is your bottom end as far as your 1 rep max. So the load that you actually want to be using. Anything under that is usually going to elicit enough of a response. If you're going in, 40% of your max, that's really not that much weight to stress the body enough to where it needs to be. You could obviously start there, and then you have a lot of room to progress as you go. But I would stay above 50% of your 1 rep max, and then stay below 75% to 80%, because that's going to be just too heavy to perform the amount of volume that you need.
Yeah.
But also to perform the amount of volume safely. The worst thing you could do is get injured, while you're trying to gain muscle mass, because you could really push it and then get injured in the gym, and then you're out of the gym for 2-3 weeks, right? If it's a simple injury.
Right.
So
yeah,
you want to err on the side of caution for sure as far as load. Make sure that you're performing your reps with almost perfect technique. There's a little bit of room for a little bit of body English, I call it. If you're performing it safely, it's fine. But your body can't really tell the load that you're using. It knows how hard it's working, but it doesn't know the load that it's using. That's your ego, right? So if you're using a 20-pound dumbbell to do a curl, and you're doing it super strict, it's going to be a lot harder than using a 100-pound dumbbell with a swing to it, right? You really want to focus on the mind-muscle connection. That's another point as well, that you really want to focus on the muscles that you're working as you're performing the exercise. Unlike powerlifting, where you're just trying to complete the rep with perfect form, you actually do want to think about how hard it is while you're training, and all the little muscle fibers that are firing, and you really want to have that mind-muscle connection. There's a lot of studies that prove that. So like intentionally training, that's going to help too.
Yeah,
so not just sitting there on your phone and doing curls. I call that junk volume, right? Like, why do 3 or 4 sets when you're texting as you're doing your set or talking to somebody? You really want to focus in and get used to that time in the gym.
Yeah,
sure.
And that just goes back to the old saying, no pain, no gain, right? I think that was an old, I don't know how far back that goes, but it's probably something from maybe either pre or post Arnold, but it was definitely in regards to both maybe athletic performance training, where you're basically going until you spill your lunch or you collapse, kind of thing. So obviously, for experienced athletes, there's one thing. Obviously, you can go to the extreme under supervision if you have the tolerance and you've been training for a long time. But the no pain, no gain thing doesn't necessarily apply to this situation where you're going to lift until your arm feels numb, or like you're going to go until something pops, right? It's not, obviously there is such a thing as quality over quantity for that reason. So what you're saying is on the phone or texting while you're doing something, you're not focused, and that's the mindfulness we're talking about. So when it comes to recovery and rest, that can be equally as important for gaining muscle mass. It's not just the time in the gym, and like you had mentioned with the diet and nutrition and hydration, it's all part of the recovery. And whether that's resting between sets properly, or resting and getting enough sleep at night, or even switching up your workouts so you're not doing bench press, Monday through Friday. So it's one or another form of recovery that your muscle tissue needs for the development. So that's, I think that's another thing, the no pain, no gain thing, the recovery, that obviously is another misconception, right? That you need to just train like 100% all the time, which isn't necessarily true for what we're trying to accomplish here. So, and obviously there's so many methods out there. I mean, you'll do different training than other people and maybe myself or whatever, but it's, once you find that and you get comfortable and you've been doing it for a few weeks, you'll know when you can start progressing. You'll be able to tell that if you used to be able to lift 20 pounds for 10 repetitions and now it feels like you could do 15, obviously you're getting stronger and you should notice the difference in your lean body weight. So before you move on to the next intensity. So I guess there were a couple questions that I had heard from students and I've heard before that maybe we'll follow up on. And this one was, does doing cardio reduce muscle mass? Do you want to go ahead and give your 2 cents on that one?
For sure, yeah. I would, so it depends on a lot of different things. First of all, it depends on how much you're eating, how many calories you're taking. It doesn't directly eat your muscle. If you're not eating enough, your calories would have to be pretty low before your body starts breaking down its own muscle tissue. It's definitely not, if your ultimate goal is hypertrophy, it's definitely not a good use of time to do, I would say anything above a moderate intensity cardio, and I would limit it because you're taking away from your recovery. You're also taking away from your in-gym performance. Right. So if your focus is purely on hypertrophy, you don't want to go and do a 5K run before your strength session, your hypertrophy session, right? So in my opinion, there's far better things you should be focusing on and focusing your time on. One of them is meal prep. Instead of going for a jog for 45 minutes, come home after school, after work, prep your meals for the next couple of days. That's going to be a way better use of time than going and doing cardio. Cardio is obviously very important. It's not something that you should neglect, but you should probably be limiting it to a certain degree if your ultimate overall goal is hypertrophy. And you can also you'll get some cardiovascular benefits out of your weight training if you set it up right. Yes. You could do some circuits at the end of your hypertrophy sessions, which will keep your cardiovascular system very healthy. Because cardio isn't a type of exercise; it's a response to what you're doing in the gym. Okay, so a lot of people, when they say cardio, they label an exercise as cardiovascular, but it's not. It's the adaptation that's happening. So when you say cardio, that's really what you mean is you're training your cardiovascular system. You're not doing a certain type of exercise. So you can set up your finishers on hypertrophy or strength training days, where at the end of your workout you could do a circuit. You can do body weight. You can do free weights if you want. But what you want to do is keep your rest time low and make sure you're working the whole time. As long as your heart rate's elevated. I don't know what the current recommendations are, but you can look up like target heart rate zones and just to make sure that your heart rate's elevated enough to get those adaptations that you're looking for. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents. I would incorporate it into my strength training. Right,
and that's a good point you were going to bring up there. I was going to mention is obviously circuit training would be a form of cardiovascular. Your heart rate is obviously increased to the point of, let's say 65% of your estimated max heart rate. It's elevated. If it's continuous and you're doing a circuit throughout the whole thing, then obviously you're doing some form of cardio. The whole point of that was basically to squeeze in an hour-long workout while getting the benefit of muscular training as well, as opposed to doing 30 minutes of straight cycling or running and then doing weight training. So I think things have come a long way since that mindset. I think everyone has kind of adapted to just the awareness of that. But there still are, I guess, a lot of hesitation regarding, oh, well, I don't want to go for a run or a walk, or I have a soccer game or a hockey game on Friday, and I fear that I'm going to burn so many calories that my muscles will just deflate. And you had mentioned that before at the beginning. It doesn't necessarily work that way. You can get your cardiovascular and physical activity in by doing regular, movements and walking and things. It won't affect your training that you're doing in the gym. So, so thanks for your perspective on that, because I think that was one that a lot of people have as well. And then I guess lastly, which kind of ties into our weight training for women program that Kim is running, is the old, and I say old because I believe it kind of goes back quite a long time, is the misconception that women who pick up a weight and do anything but, aerobics or whatever will just get bulky. Anything over 5 pounds, and they feel like, well, I don't want to do this because I don't want to look like a strong bodybuilder person. So that was probably next to the cardio one. I think that's another top thing that people have in their mind. So do you want to maybe just quickly discuss, obviously, the myth behind that and the physiology so that they understand?
Yeah, for sure. I find, it's funny when I hear people say that, because most males, when they're training specifically for hypertrophy, won't get bulky, right? Like it takes a lot of training over multiple years to gain a pretty appreciable amount of muscle mass, right? So it is, and it's harder for most females to add muscle mass as well. One of the reasons why is hormones play a huge role in that as well, right? That's why men typically have more muscle mass than females do. But I find that males, they eat more than females do usually. If you look at the guidelines for recommended daily intake of calories, there's a big difference, right? So those are two reasons, but yeah, it would be really hard for a female to get that much muscle mass just from general strength training. So it's really strength training is great because it increases your muscle mass and you can burn a ton of calories while you're doing it and afterwards. But they just don't have the same amount of testosterone production that males do naturally. So it's pretty difficult to get a lot of muscle mass packed on. Yeah.
Sure. And obviously, like you were just mentioning, there are countless benefits, right, for even women specifically. Especially core strength and a pelvic floor and things like that. So it's preventing further injuries that come with aging. So I think that was pretty much the topics of discussion. Obviously, we could go all day regarding specific workouts, and people will come up to you and say, well, I'd like to start building muscle mass. Can you design a program for me? And I saw this in Men's Fitness magazine. Is this legit? And because like we said, everyone's different and it'll work for one person and not the other. And it's really just what works for you. So obviously we should kind of cut it here because we could just go all day and talk about that stuff. So
I would just throw in there that as a beginner, literally any program that you do is going to work if they match those principles that we touched on, making sure you have a correct amount of volume, intensity, but like we kind of touched on, being intentional and focused, like that. If you bring those two things to your program, they're going to be a lot better than like the most advanced program that you can think of, not done with any focus, right? So as long, obviously you want to be using a program that's efficient, time tested. If they meet those criteria that we touched on, it's more than likely it's going to work. But you really do have to bring some of your own elbow grease and intensity and focus on it.
Sure. It definitely doesn't just happen overnight, and it won't just magically appear. Obviously you need to put the work in, and awesome. Well, thanks, Chris, for giving us your perspective and experience with this very popular topic. We will be doing this again next week. It'll be, I believe, Kim and Sarah. I think they're going to discuss fitness levels when it comes to sports and
Right.
maintaining fitness levels. So that'll be next week's Ask a Trainer Tuesday on the 6th of October. Other than that, tomorrow we've got a whole bunch of stuff happening. I believe there's a few things at 4 p.m. and there's just every day we've got stuff going on. So check out our Instagram accounts, the recreation accounts, for the promotion of those. Other than that, unless there's anyone else who wants to pop on and ask a question live right now, you can feel free to DM us or email our accounts for questions for next upcoming weeks. Other than that, thanks again, and be well, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Right. Take care. Be well, Mike.
Yeah. See you guys.